The phone began ringing at exactly 3:07 a.m., slicing through the silence of the apartment like a blade. Daniel froze before he even reached for it, because deep down, some part of him already knew the call carried something heavy, something from a past he had spent 3 years trying to bury. No one called at that hour unless something was terribly wrong. When he finally answered, the voice on the other end was rushed, trembling, and unfamiliar, but the words that followed made his heart stop cold. "She's in surgery. You're her last hope. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances in life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel." Stories like this remind us that sometimes love doesn't truly end, it just changes form. 3 years earlier, Daniel had stood in a courthouse hallway watching the woman he once promised forever walk away without looking back. The divorce had not been dramatic or explosive. It had been worse than that. It had been quiet. Two people exhausted from misunderstandings, buried resentments, and dreams that no longer aligned. Olivia had wanted adventure, travel, spontaneity. Daniel had wanted stability, routine, the safety of predictable days. Over time, those differences became cracks, and the cracks became walls. By the end, they barely recognized each other. When the judge finalized the papers, Daniel felt something collapse inside him, not loudly, but permanently. He spent months afterward learning how to exist alone. He changed apartments, changed routines, even changed the coffee shop he used to visit with her every Sunday morning. Friends encouraged him to date again, but he couldn't bring himself to replace what he had lost. It wasn't that he still expected reconciliation. It was that Olivia had been woven into the fabric of his life so deeply that removing her left holes everywhere. Eventually, time did what time always does. It softened the sharp edges. The memories stopped hurting as much. He focused on his career, poured energy into long work hours, and convinced himself he had moved on. Occasionally, he would hear something, a song she loved, a phrase she used to say, and feel a quiet ache, but nothing unbearable. He told himself that chapter was over. Then came the phone call. The nurse explained in hurried sentences that Olivia had been admitted after a severe internal complication following a routine medical procedure. Something had gone terribly wrong. There had been unexpected bleeding, organ damage, and now she was in emergency surgery. Her parents were out of the country on a humanitarian trip, unreachable. The emergency contact listed in her records was still Daniel. Legally, because they were divorced, the hospital couldn't proceed with certain high-risk decisions without consent from someone authorized, and Olivia had written his name on her updated directive months earlier. That realization struck him harder than the news itself. She had chosen him. Even after everything. Even after they had separated their lives completely. Somewhere, at some point, she had still trusted him to make decisions for her when it mattered most. Daniel dressed without fully realizing what he was doing. His hands trembled as he grabbed his keys. The city streets were nearly empty, glowing under streetlights, as he drove toward the hospital with his chest tightening more with each passing minute. Memories flooded him without permission, the way she used to laugh when she couldn't stop, the nights they stayed awake planning trips they never took, the arguments that started small and ended with both of them saying things they regretted. By the time he reached the hospital, fear had replaced nostalgia. He wasn't thinking about the past anymore. He was thinking about whether she would survive the next hour. The waiting room felt unbearably bright. Machines beeped somewhere beyond closed doors. Nurses moved quickly, voices low and urgent. A surgeon eventually approached him with a serious expression and began explaining the situation in clinical terms: multiple complications, critical blood loss, uncertain prognosis. They needed consent to proceed with an aggressive intervention that carried significant risk but offered the best chance of survival. Daniel barely processed the medical jargon. All he could see was Olivia lying somewhere behind those doors, unconscious, fighting for her life. The same woman who once danced barefoot in their kitchen while cooking pasta. The same woman who cried when they watched sad movies. The same woman he had loved, and perhaps never truly stopped loving. He signed the consent forms with shaking hands. Hours passed like years. Every minute stretched painfully, each second heavy with uncertainty. He sat alone, staring at the floor, replaying their marriage in his mind. The good moments surfaced first: road trips, birthdays, quiet evenings. Then the regrets followed. Words he wished he could take back. Times he had chosen work over time with her. Moments he had assumed there would always be another chance to fix things later. It dawned on him that later isn't guaranteed. Not in relationships. Not in life. At some point near dawn, the surgeon returned. The operation had been complicated but successful, for now. Olivia was alive, but critical. The next 24 hours would determine whether her body could recover. Relief hit Daniel so hard he had to sit down. They allowed him to see her briefly in the intensive care unit. She looked fragile, pale, surrounded by tubes and monitors. Nothing like the vibrant woman he remembered. For a moment, he hesitated at the doorway, unsure whether he even had the right to be there anymore. But then he stepped forward. He stood beside her bed, looking at her face, and something inside him broke open. Not with pain this time, but with clarity. Love hadn't disappeared. It had simply been buried under disappointment and distance. Seeing her like this stripped everything down to what truly mattered, her being alive. He whispered words she couldn't hear, apologies she might never remember, promises he didn't know if he could keep. But he said them anyway. Days passed. Olivia remained unconscious for a while, then slowly began responding. Daniel stayed. Not because anyone asked him to, but because he couldn't imagine leaving. He coordinated with doctors, updated her parents once they were reachable, and handled practical details like insurance paperwork. Nurses assumed he was still her husband. He never corrected them. When Olivia finally opened her eyes fully, confusion flickered across her face before recognition settled in. She seemed surprised to see him. Not uncomfortable, just surprised. Recovery was slow and painful. There were setbacks, moments when doctors worried about infection or complications. Through it all, Daniel remained present. He brought her favorite tea once she could drink. He read to her when she was too weak to hold a book. Sometimes they talked about neutral things, movies, mutual friends, work. Sometimes they sat in silence. One afternoon, she asked why he came. The answer felt simple. Because you mattered. Because you still matter. Over time, deeper conversations followed. They spoke about their marriage honestly for the first time without defensiveness. Both admitted mistakes. Both acknowledged how fear and pride had kept them from fixing things when there was still time. Olivia confessed that adding his name as her emergency contact had not been accidental. She had done it because, despite everything, she trusted him more than anyone else in the world. That confession changed something between them. Healing took months. Physical therapy, follow-up surgeries, emotional recovery. Daniel helped when she needed it but also gave her independence. Their connection grew slowly, cautiously, like two people learning each other again after years apart. Neither of them rushed to define what they were becoming. Sometimes love doesn't return dramatically. Sometimes it rebuilds quietly, through small acts of care, patience, and understanding. If this story is touching your heart so far, please take a moment to engage with the video, like, share, or leave a comment. Your support helps stories of hope reach more people who might need them today. As Olivia regained strength, they began spending time outside the hospital, walks in the park, coffee shops, simple dinners. There was a gentleness between them now that hadn't existed before. Expectations were lower, appreciation higher. They had both learned how fragile life could be. One evening, nearly a year after the surgery, they sat watching the sunset from a hill overlooking the city. The same city where their marriage had ended. The same city where, unexpectedly, something new had begun. Daniel realized he wasn't thinking about the past anymore. He was thinking about the present. About the woman beside him who had survived something terrifying. About the strange path that had brought them back into each other's lives. Before we reach the ending, I have a special request for you. Please comment the word hope if you believe people deserve second chances, and if you believe love can return in unexpected ways. Olivia reached for his hand first. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. But it carried more meaning than any words could. In that moment, Daniel understood something profound. Their divorce had not been the end of their story. It had been a painful chapter that forced them to grow separately so they could meet again as different, wiser people. Love doesn't always follow straight lines. Sometimes it breaks, bends, and disappears for a while before finding its way back. Years later, Daniel would still remember the sound of that phone ringing at 3 a.m. He would remember the fear, the drive through empty streets, the sight of Olivia in that hospital bed. But he would also remember what came after, the healing, the forgiveness, the quiet rebuilding of something stronger than before. Because sometimes, the worst night of your life becomes the beginning of a miracle you never expected. And if this story moved you even a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You never know who might need a reminder that hope is still possible.